Hello everyone. Just welcome to a short video here around PicoPlanet. An introduction to the whys and whats we're doing. With thanks, we're here in a local coffee shop close to where Pico's based in St Neots. So big shout out to Bohemia for allowing us to do this here. My name's John Parker. I'm here on behalf of PicoPlanet, and I'm here alongside Mark Jones, our chairman, to just talk you through everything PicoPlanet.
So, gentlemen, why PicoPlanet at all?
Well, for me, so I'd read the IPCC report in 2018 and realised that really everything had to change to decarbonise our world. And there's loads we could talk about the science, but I'm going to just read you the final paragraph from yesterday's another IPCC report. So that was the end of February 2022, and it's quite specific. The cumulative scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. Any further delay is conceited anticipatory global action of adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window for a secure and livable, sustainable future for all. So I think the IPCC, every time there's a new report, shows us just how serious things are. And as a business, we realise that, as with all challenges that face us, we perhaps have to change and adapt. So that's what we've started to do. So myself, alongside Mark and the board, have really been putting together a plan of how we reach our goals within the scientific boundaries, namely that we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by 50% by the end of the decade, so by 2030. So certainly it's a big challenge, don't you think, Mark?
It is, and it's one that faces us all. I'm very fortunate in that I spent more than 10 years in Africa running photographic safari camps in the Masai Mara, so I'm very used to fragile environments and how easily things can have a negative impact. And then back in the UK, I spent time as an operations director with Centre Parks, biodiversity, and the Eden project down in Cornwall, which has been the most successful of the Millennium Projects, all about sustainability, plant life. So I've got a background that helps me to understand the issues even before we see the measurements, which are pretty damning. And as far as I'm concerned, this is about bringing the most important current issue facing us all into the boardroom, but then making sure that it gets engaged with by every member of the team. Way back, we learnt about health and safety. We no longer make people work with asbestos. That became a big issue for us as a business. HR policies and procedures, team engagement, the way we trust people, engage people. We've learned how to do that. The thing on our plates now is our environmental responsibility. So health and safety, HR policies, marketing, and environmental responsibility sit firmly in the boardroom, which is why I also chair the PicoPlanet strategic group to make sure that there is weight behind our initiatives.
So what does Pico Technology measure, and how do they set those goals?
Well, the simple answer is everything. And it's a big challenge for a business because you have to start to think about every part of it and the impact, which in terms of CO2 isn't always obvious. So we take the obvious things, of course, like the energy that we use, which are relatively easy to address. Also, everything that we produce, so the products we manufacture, the software we operate, and how they all work together. Also, alongside things like packaging, we're like a lot of other companies, we have a global supply chain, so we're buying raw components coming in and they'll be packaged, and then we're sending a finished product out, which again is packaged. And actually, unless you join those two things up, you create a lot of waste. So it's really looking at everything. But of course, until we measure what we're doing, we can't really do anything about it. And there were some really interesting things that came out in the numbers. One of the big things for us, we're a very global company. We have offices around the world, so in the US, in Germany, as well as China. And of course, we have a big carbon footprint from our flights. It was by far and away our biggest thing. So just to give you kind of a rough idea, we ended up with 6 times more carbon emissions from our flights
Yes.
as against to actually running the whole operation of the business in terms of their energy consumption. So, and still, until we start to look at that and understand it, it's very difficult to kind of make real change.
And that's where technology has come in, because if this had happened 5 years ago even, the technology was not sufficiently stable to be able to engage with our customers over the internet, which you've been able to do now.
Yeah, and of course, COVID has been horrible to live with, of course, but actually the change in terms of customer attitudes to, working, online meetings has completely changed. I mean, I tried to start to do that pre-COVID, whereas now it's very normal. I will talk to my global distributor network, which is pretty much all over the world, and I'll have regular meetings every few weeks, as opposed to previously I'd have been traveling, once a year out with a huge footprint and also a cost to the business.
But you've actually been able to build closer relationships through the more frequent meetings on the web than you were able to with your once a year update. Yes.
Yeah, and that's very true. And probably something that I would have argued previously. I'd have gone, well, I could never do that same job remotely and working on video call. But actually the relationships, thankfully for me, were already there, but they continue to grow. And so, yeah, you're right. It is a closer relationship.
But you're also right that the starting point is to measure everything. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And you've put a lot of hours into working with our finance department, our operations team, to get close to the actual measurements as best we can with the current technology to make sure that we can then demonstrate our improvements over time.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that we hope to achieve on the website, of course, is we're going to be putting those initial numbers. So we've got our base numbers, what we call the base numbers, and then as we progress, obviously over the coming years to reach our targets, our first one being to reduce our emissions by 35% by the end of 2023, and then obviously the 50%, which is a big challenge, but 50% by the end of the decade. But equally, because we understand what our carbon footprint is, we know what we need to achieve, and that's really, really key to it all.
And there are quick wins. I mean, we just don't use bubble wrap anymore. We shred our excess cardboard and we use that to repack products going out. And you could argue that what could I do? What difference does it make to the world situation? We've put 216 solar panels on our roof. If 100,000 businesses in the UK put 200 panels on their roof, suddenly the needle shifts. It really does shift. So it's not about the fact that what we do is not going to have a massive impact. It's about trying to set an example and to say to others, if we can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing about moving to solar, we've done that in conjunction with a full refurbishment of the building where we've super insulated our office space, and the difference in terms of our offices for our staff is so much better as we come back kind of from in our post-COVID world. So actually we're not only switching to green energy, we're also using less energy because we've put that investment into all the insulation particularly.
Yeah, we're also going through what do we do about hybrid working? Because obviously it's really important that a team gets together, especially development people, to bounce off each other, to energize each other with finding new and unique solutions. But there is certainly, we have proven that we can work quite comfortably with people at home as well. So this basis for mixed working, hybrid working, you've demonstrated that if you travel more than 4 miles each way a day on your commute, you save money by staying at home, even with the heating on.
Yes.
So, the level of calculation that's gone into this has allowed us to make really sensible decisions going forward.
Yeah, and if we look at one of the measures that we took at the beginning, of course, was to understand what a carbon footprint was with people travelling into the office, and we were over 200 tonnes of carbon just for people travelling out. So if we can move to hybrid where people are in, say, only 50%, we can save 100 tonnes of carbon just on commute and the time. So I think we certainly both agree. we need the time together to collaborate, but actually sometimes working from home can be really efficient as well. So we need a bit of both.
Just remind me, what was our total tonnage before COVID hit us?
We're
Our
about
baseline.
1,250 tons.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And that we're going to hit by 35% by the end of next year and by 50% by the end of 2030.
That's the plan.
We're going to do it. We're absolutely going to do it.
Yeah.
What it takes,
Well, we have
we'll
to.
do it. Yeah.
Don't these extra measures just add costs to the business?
That's the interesting thing. I think we thought when we first started the journey that that would be the case. And of course, there are certain costs. You know, we could talk about 216 panels, which was a significant investment in the same way that the insulation has been and the refurbishment of the office. But then there are we think simple stuff like I said, supply chain. You know, we're bringing cardboard in with raw material, and then, you know, by actually shredding that up and using that as a packaging material, we're not buying bubble wrap, less plastic. We're not paying to have that cardboard removed from the business to be recycled. So actually, in a lot of cases, we've found that we're actually gaining. Yes, there's some investments to be made, but I think overall, it's fairly even, I imagine, certainly over the longer term.
I've been in different companies and including PLC companies in the UK, and I think there has always been an understanding at board level that it's appropriate to invest to save. So if you put in great insulation, if you put in your solar panels, they will pay for themselves over a period of time. And almost all CFOs would be comfortable with that, because you're trying to keep your base cost as low as possible at the same time as doing the right thing. And in these cases, it works perfectly.
Yeah, and actually some of the bigger numbers. So, you know, I was traveling around the world. You know, we have big travel budgets historically, and by reducing the amount that we're flying and that travel, you know, we can save some costs. And we're just lucky in a way that, you know, the world's changed where video calling can be it's so much more efficient than it was even 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
You know, it works. People are much more open to it. And we've also had this opportunity through COVID to learn how to use the technology properly. And it's not always appropriate. I mean, I'm certainly myself really looking forward to getting out and revisiting customers and shows, but we'll just perhaps have to think a little bit. There's no reason why I can't take a trip into Europe on the train rather than getting on a flight. And, you know, the carbon impact is probably about, you know, 5% going on a train versus a flight. So it's a huge difference in terms of our overheads and making longer trips and making it work. So there's lots to think about. And we continue to learn, I think is fair to say.
When you travel, if you take an empty seat on the train, that is zero carbon impact. The train's running anyway. Yeah. The only time it becomes an issue is if the trains are so popular, they put on a second train. But even that would be good, because it means perhaps a plane isn't flying. So yeah, over time things change.
Yeah, and that's it. It's people now driving the change to industry, and we want to be part of that change. You know, very much it's about the evolution of a business, and our environmental impact will become more and more key. Along with, you know, people's purchasing decisions.
I was fascinated by your calculation on computers left on standby. That was just fascinating.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. So obviously we run effectively an engineering business. We've got a lot of software engineers, hardware engineers, and they tend to work with multiple screens on their desks. Now, very kind of round numbers, but our overall impact of running all of our PCs is around about 12 tons of CO2. But if we break that down, bear in mind, if we take with a little over 100 people working 8 hours a day in kind of round numbers, that's about 8 tons of CO2. The 16 hours when those same PCs are on standby would be creating about 4 tons CO2 a year. So you can lose, you know, 33% of our impact just by making sure we turn our power bars off straight away. So, you know, hopefully, you know, we're learning as we go along, and we can keep learning more and doing more to bring this down. Because one of the key things that everybody has to start to get their head around is, in some ways, it's really, really easy to decarbonise by carbon offsetting. And that's fine to a degree, and that's where we'll start. Certainly now we understand our what our CO2 impact is. We're going to be doing carbon offsets, but it's really important that everybody actually reduces the carbon you use, which is why the 50%. So as we bring our carbon usage down, you know, it's going to be 600-700 tons. But as we do that, we will continue to offset the carbon we do use. So it's not an either or, it's both.
Yes.
But it's really important that people start to understand the difference between a carbon offset and a carbon reduction, which, you know, we should all be thinking about everything that we do that has an impact.
I think in summary, Pico Technology is absolutely committed to the 50% reduction by 2030 as a target that we'll meet. But along the way, we'll learn of other opportunities, and technology will rise to the challenge because everybody's asking the same questions. So we are absolutely determined that we will be leaders in this field. Pico Technology will reduce its carbon footprint dramatically, and we'll continue to learn along the journey.
Yeah, and that will be the key aim of what we plan to do with this website, actually, is to, as we make those learnings, those understandings, we'll be sharing them so other businesses hopefully can follow along, and also decarbonise.
And whatever is on our website, we've got 165 distributors around the world. They'll see the same message. So yeah, we're doing as much as we can and making it as public as we can. It's an obsession. It's a good obsession.
That's true. That's true.